Hello and welcome back to Peaky Boardgamer. My name is Alderac and in today's episode I'll be explaining the game Istanbul. Istanbul is designed by Rüdiger Dorn, it's for 2 to 5 players and plays in a bit more than an hour. This game is a must-have and I can't wait to start explaining this one to you. Let's start. In the game, players take the role of merchants. Along with their assistants, players will be wandering in the streets of Istanbul. The play area of this game consists of multiple play styles. Each one of these tiles offers a specific action. Players will be visiting these tiles by moving their stack of discs. After leaving one of the assistants on the tile or picking one up, players will proceed and perform the tile's action. The goal for players is to gather 5 gems before other players. There are multiple ways to acquire one of the gems that exist in the play area. For example, by exchanging your goods in the Sultan's palace, or buying them from the gemstone dealer using your liras. The player who acquires the required number of gems before other players will win in the game of Istanbul. First, you must create the play area using the play styles. All play styles belong to 3 different numbered sets from 1 to 16 as it's indicated in the top left corner. A green, a blue and a red. Choose any one of the 3 sets and then place the tiles in specific order as I show you in the graphics. I have used the blue set, which is also suggested for new players. You can also place these tiles in a random order, however, you must make sure that the fountain tile is one of the 4 central tiles. Now we need to place some more components on these tiles. Let's start with the 2 mosques. The game uses 4 main good types. We have jewels, fruit, textiles and spices. The Great Mosque has spaces for jewels and fruit, and the Small Mosque has tile spaces for textiles and spices. After you separate the tiles by type, you must then order them depending on the number of goods icons they have in the top part of the tile, placing 2 on top and 5 in the bottom. Now, if this is a 3 players game, you need to remove the 5 icon tile. And if it's a 2 players game, you also need to remove the 4 icon tile. In my example, I will set up for 3 players, so I need to include this one. So after you have ordered the tile stacks, place them in the indicated spaces, facing upwards. Finally, on these tiles you also need to place gems equal to the number of players, so I will place 3 gems to each one of the tiles. Exception: in a 5 players game, you need to place 4 gems and not 5. In the post office, you need to take the 4 mail indicators and with them you must cover the 4 top square spaces. Let's set up now the small and the large market, which indicate a space for demand tiles. Separate the demand tiles to white and black and then shuffle each stack. Place the white tiles in the small market facing upwards and then the black tiles in the large market the same way. Moving to Wainwright now, which has a dedicated space for wheelbarrow extensions. You need to place 3 tiles per player and also 1 gem per player in the indicated space. In the gemstone dealer, you need to place gems starting from the last space and you must continue until the space that depicts your player count. So in a 3 player setup, I will stop here. Then do exactly the same thing in the Sultan's palace. Create a supply with the liras of the game. For convenience, I will be using my chips instead. And then also create a supply of face-down bonus cards after you shuffle them. Then you have the 2 pieces of Governor and the Smuggler. For each one of these pieces, you roll the 2 dice and then you place the piece to the tile that depicts the corresponding number. Use the big numbers of tiles this time. Do this once again to place the Smuggler. Each player takes a wheelbarrow board as well as all the components of one of the 4 colors. Players place these 4 cubes covering the spaces of the leftmost column of the 4 tracks, indicating that they start the game with 0 goods. Players have a merchant disc and 5 assistants. One of the assistants is placed next to the play area. Players create a stack of their assistants and then they place the merchant on top. This stack is then placed on the fountain place tile. Players place their family members in the police station tile. Also, each player is dealt 1 bonus card from the supply, which they keep secret from their opponents. Players then select a player at random to take the first turn in the game. That player will start the game with 2 liras. Moving clockwise, each next player will take one more lira than the previous one. If this were a two-players game only, you need to place the merchant discs of the unused colors in the two mosque tiles and one in the gemstone dealer tile. Our three-players game is now ready to start. Players alternate turns, starting with the first player and continuing in a clockwise manner. During the game, players are trying to collect 5 gems from the board and place them on their wheelbarrow board, unless this is a two-players game, in which case they need to collect 6 gems. When a player collects the required number of gems, it will trigger the game's end. However, we will talk about this towards the end of this video. On their turn, players must first move their stack of discs to a different playstyle. They do this by moving orthogonally 1 or 2 playstyles away. Then, to proceed with the rest of their turn, players must either leave one of their assistants on their tile, or if there is already one there, to pick it up. So, if the player does not pick up one assistant or does not deploy one of their assistants from the stack, then their turn is over and it's the next player's turn now. Players are trying to avoid losing a turn because of that, so after placing or picking up one of their assistants, they proceed with the second phase of their turn. In the next phase of their turn, players check if they have entered their movement in one of the tiles that contains one or more of their opponent merchants. In this case, the player must pay 2 liras to each one of the merchant's players. If the player is unable to pay or does not wish to do so, the player's turn is again immediately over. If in a two-players game you encounter a non-player merchant pawn, then the 2 liras are paid to the general supply and then you roll the 2 dice, moving the neutral merchant pawn to the tile with a corresponding number. In this case, you move the merchant to tile number 5. In the third phase of the turn, the player finally executes the action associated to the tile just visited. I will explain all of these tile actions in a bit. After performing the tile's action, the player's turn moves to a fourth phase if on this tile we also have any of the governor, the smuggler or any other player's family member pawn. In this case, the player has to resolve all of these pawns in any order. Let's start with the governor. As it's indicated on the pawn, the player gains 1 new bonus card from the supply, which is then added to the player's other bonus cards. Then, the player must discard one of their cards, even the one just gained, unless they pay 2 liras to the general supply. Then the player rolls the 2 dice and moves the governor pawn to the playstyle that has a number equal to the total value of the 2 dice, in this case 7. Similarly, with the smuggler, the player gains any one good by moving the corresponding marker 1 space to the right. Then again, the player must spend one of their goods by moving the corresponding marker 1 space to the left, unless they spend 2 liras. So in the current example, if I don't want to spend my liras, I will have to lose the textile I just gained. Again, the player rolls the 2 dice and moves the pawn to the corresponding tile. Finally, if another player's family member pawn is encountered on a tile which is not the police station, then for each such pawn, the player receives either 3 liras or a bonus card. Then the family member pawn is moved to the police station. So to recap, the player's turn starts with movement. After the player moves, they must check if there are other merchants on that tile and pay them. Then the player executes the tile's action, and finally, from the tile we have the governor, the smuggler or any player's family member. The player must resolve them in any order. Then it's the next player's turn. And now I will explain what each one of the place tiles does. To start with, there are 3 warehouse tiles which work exactly the same and correspond to one of the goods. We have a fruit warehouse, a fabric warehouse and a spice warehouse. When players execute a warehouse place, they fully load their wheelbarrow with a corresponding good by moving the marker to the rightmost space. At the start of the game, players can have up to 2 pieces of each good. Let's see how players can increase this capacity. They can do this in the Wainwright tile. Here the player can spend 7 liras and take 1 wheelbarrow piece and add it to their wheelbarrow. By doing so, they extend the capacity of all of their goods by 1. Players can buy only 1 piece each time they visit the tile. Last but not least, when players complete their wheelbarrow, they instantly gain 1 gem from the tile, placing it here. Having a lot of goods is very important in this game, so let's see other ways to gain goods except on the warehouses. The black market. Here the player chooses to gain one fabric or one spice or one fruit and then rolls the 2 dice. Depending on the total and according to this diagram, the player also gains jewel. With a roll of 11, I will gain 3 jewels. The post office. Here the player gains all the depicted goods that are not covered by a mail indicator. So in our example, the player would gain 1 spice, 2 liras and 1 fruit. Then the player pushes the leftmost mail indicator downwards. If all mail indicators are already in the bottom space, the player simply resets all of them to the top space. And what can players do with their goods? For example, they can sell them in the markets. There are 2 market tiles, one small and one large. They work exactly the same. Both of these places work with demand tiles. The tile which is on top indicates the demand for this specific action. The player can sell any number of goods from their wheelbarrow that are in demand and then gain liras according to this diagram here. In this example, I have 2 fruit in the wheelbarrow, however the demand is only 1, so I could sell 1 fruit at max. There is also demand for 2 fabric, but I have none, and there is also demand for 2 jewels, but I have only 1 which I could sell it. So I've sold 2 goods, and according to the diagram, I gained 7 liras. To finalize the action, you place the top demand tile in the bottom. A player can also gain more liras by gambling in the tea house. The player first declares any number from 3 to 12 and then rolls the 2 dice. Let's say, for example, I declare the number 8. If the total value of the 2 dice equals or exceeds the number declared, the player gains liras equal to the declared number. If, however, the total is less than the declared value, the player gains only 2 liras. Another good use for the player's goods are mosques. There are 2 mosque places in the game and they work exactly the same. A player executing this action gains one of the 2 mosque tiles by spending the number of goods indicated in the top of the tile, so I could spend 2 jewels to gain this tile. A player can only buy 1 tile per each visit, and in addition to that, a player can never have the same tile twice. So, in a future visit, the blue player can only buy 1 tile from this stack. As soon as a player gains 1 tile from each stack, the player immediately gains 1 gem. All of these tiles depict a bonus which comes into effect at the moment the player gains the tile. As soon as players gain this tile, they immediately gain the 5th assistant from next from the board, placing it in the bottom of the merchant stack. A player who has acquired this mosque tile can pay 2 liras to the general supply and take any 1 assistant from the board, placing it in the bottom of the merchant stack. A player can use this power only once during each one of their turns. Whenever a player who has this mosque tile visits any one of the warehouses, they can spend an additional 2 liras to gain 1 additional good of any type. This mosque tile's power is connected to the 2 places that involve dice rolling. After rolling the 2 dice, the player can change the value of one of them to 4. In the previous example of the tea house, if the blue player had acquired one of these mosque tiles, he could use it to change this value to a 4, exceeding the declared 8, thus gaining 8 liras. A player in the Sultan's palace can gain 1 gem. The cost is determined by the revealed goods in the boxes. So currently it is 1 good of each type plus any other good. After players spend the goods, they take the next gem, placing it onto their wheelbarrow. As you can see, the cost to buy the next gem is increased by 1 more jewel. A player can only buy 1 gem per each visit. In the gemstone dealer, the player buys gems using their liras instead. The cost in liras is indicated in the first revealed box after the last gem. So the green player can spend 14 liras to gain the first gem. The next gem will cost 15 liras, and again, players can only buy 1 gem for each visit. A player who visits the police station can send their family member to any one place and then execute that action. The police station action only has a meaning if the player's family member is in the police station, otherwise it has no effect. Finally, when players visit the fountain, they can take any number of their assistants from the board and place them in the bottom of their merchant stack. Important, the fountain is the only playstyle in which you don't need an assistant to deploy. Secondly, the fountain is the only playstyle in which you don't have to pay other players for encountering their merchant stacks. So when in the fountain, phase 2 of the player's turn is not applicable. The caravanserai. Before explaining the action, as you can see in the middle of the tile there is a dedicated space for discarded bonus cards. All discarded bonus cards in the game are placed facing upwards in this dedicated space. Now back to explaining the action. The player who executes this action gains 2 bonus cards and adds them to their hand. These cards can be taken from the face down card supply and or from the top of the caravanserai discard pile. So I could take this card and then this card as well. Then the player needs to discard any one of their cards back to the discard pile of the caravanserai. If there are not enough cards in the card supply to draw from, then reshuffle the discard from the caravanserai to create a new face down stack. Let's say a few words about bonus cards. There is no limit in the bonus cards a player can have. Also, a player can use any number of bonus cards in the same turn. All cards are one use only, and after using the cards, they are discarded in the caravanserai. With this card, the player instantly gains 5 liras, and with this one, the player instantly gains a good of any type. Each one of these cards is connected to a specific playstyle. A player using these playstyles can spend these cards to perform the action twice. A player can use this bonus card to return their own family member to the police station if it's not already there. The player also gains the reward, which is 1 bonus card or 3 liras. When using this bonus card for this one turn, you have the option to remain in the same tile and execute it again. However, you still have to use one of your assistants. When using this bonus card for this specific turn, you move your merchant stack for 3 or 4 spaces instead of 1 or 2. With this bonus card, you return any one of your assistants back in the bottom of your merchant stack. Finally, this bonus card is connected to selling goods in the small market only. If you use this card, you can sell up to 5 goods that can be of any type and not the ones depicted on the demand tile. After a player acquires the 5th gem or the 6th one in a 2-players game, the game's end is triggered. The game continues, however, until the player who sits to the right of the first player takes their turn. This means that all players have taken equal number of turns in the game. At this point, the player who has acquired the most gems wins the game. Of course, you can exceed the number of required gems. If there is a tie, the tie breaks first by the player who has the most liras, then by the player who has the most leftover goods, and finally, if the tie still exists, the player who has the most leftover bonus cards. After that, all tied players share their victory. And that was the rule explanatory video for Istanbul. If you like our videos and want to see more, please subscribe to my channel, and until next time, have fun and play more board games.